All right. Well, hello, everybody. My name's Alex Weeble, and we're here to discuss making conscious choices. The competencies intervene skillfully. It's part of our DECA Leadership Development Series. And our host today is going to be Lori Alvarado. Pretty sure you know who she is by now. Lori is going to walk us through some of these. So yeah, feel free to participate, and I'll let Lori take it away.
Hey, Alex, are you going to advance slides for me, or can I do that?
Would you like to advance slides?
Yeah, why don't I, just in case I get all mixed up or something.
Sounds good. I will give I think it's called remote control. So let me do that.
Oh, wow. That sounds like all kinds of fancy. I don't know. I can handle that.
Control.
All right. Well, while I figure that out, okay, you can control. Okay. So how do I actually advance then?
So like you have so if you hit your right arrow key.
Okay.
And or hit next there. Yeah.
I got to do it this way.
You once you're clicked on the PowerPoint, you should be able to just click next like that.
Okay, you're doing it. I'm done. You're out. I'm out.
Okay.
I'm out. Sorry. Go back to the beginning. Okay. Technology is just so fun. Okay, you're in charge. You're in control. All right. Welcome. Glad you're here. We're going to talk about make conscious choices, and I'm going to have you all engage pretty regularly. So I'm going to want you to use chat sometimes. I'll have you discuss in a group. We're going to do whiteboarding. So hopefully you will get lots of opportunity to engage. Hey, as we begin this, we have decided on each one of these, we're just going to take a few minutes and kind of orient people to our leadership model. So our definition of leadership is mobilizing people to make progress on deep, daunting, adaptive challenges. So that might be a different definition than maybe you're used to seeing. Another less noble definition of leadership is perhaps disappointing people at a rate they can handle. I'm just saying, sometimes leadership is risky, right? And you do things that aren't exactly the way everybody might want them done. So there is some risk. So it's important to see leadership involves others. It's important that we understand that it's about making progress on adaptive challenges. And then, as Alex has there are principles of leadership that we adhere to. One, leadership is an activity, not a position. So just because you sit in a seat that has authority does not make you, quote, a leader. So leadership is activity. Anyone can lead anytime, anywhere, which is why we believe leadership development is incredibly important in this organization. People are everywhere. They're in different locations. They work 24/7. They're in families' homes, right? And leadership can happen in all of those places. Leadership starts with you, and it must engage others. Leadership by yourself is not really leadership. That's just you doing some stuff. At the end of the day, purpose needs to be clear. So we exercise. Leadership is risky is the last point. You're not going to take that risk unless there's a purpose. So that's bigger and broader and deeper. We also know that I will use the word adaptive leadership. So let's get a definition of adaptive challenges real quick. They're problems or issues for which there are no clear solutions. Promise you 100% if we know the solution, we're going to do it. Chances are with an adaptive challenge, the solution is not known. We have to learn. Usually our stuckness on issues is directly related to our ability to tease out the adaptive issues within a particular challenge. So let's just jump into a difference between technical and adaptive work. With technical work, solution is clear, problem is clear. We can call an expert or an authority. I see Lynette sitting there. Here's the deal. If my computer doesn't work, I can probably go to somebody to help me figure out how to make it work. What can't be figured out is maybe the content I put in to the computer. That might be a little bit more adaptive. The work is efficient. Usually when I tell Aaron my computer no worky, usually he knows how to make it worky, and it happens pretty quickly. The problem's fixed, and that can be fixed with confidence and skill. On the adaptive side, we really don't know what the solution is, takes learning. We really don't know what the problem is, takes learning. Usually the work is lots of stakeholders have kind of some skin in the game or are affected by anything that would happen. The type of work that we do, we have to act experimentally because we don't know what the right thing to do is, because there's no one right thing. The timeline is much longer term. We are trying to make progress because generally in adaptive challenges, you never get to a fix. and we need to approach that work with curiosity. So that helps us kind of get a background. And then the last slide of our review just tells you the competencies that you see there: diagnose situation, manage self, energize others, intervene skillfully, and underneath intervene skillfully is make conscious choices. So you see how this fits into the framework. So with that, we're going to jump in to make conscious choices. And the first thing we're going to do, I have pulled a video clip out of the movie Apollo 13. So I just want you to watch the video clip, and then we're going to have a bit of a conversation afterwards.
Gene, we have a situation brewing with the carbon dioxide.
We had a CO2 filter problem on the LIM module,
5 filters on the limb.
which were meant for 2 guys for a day and a half. So I told the doc,
You're already up to 8 on the gauges. Anything over 15 and you get impaired judgment, blackouts, the beginnings of brain asphyxia.
What about the scrubbers on the command module?
They take square cartridges.
The ones on the limb are round.
Tell me this isn't a government operation.
It just isn't the contingency we've remotely looked at.
Those CO2 levels are going to be getting toxic.
Well, I suggest you gentlemen invent a way to put a square peg in a round hole. Rapidly.
Okay, people, listen up. People upstairs handed us this one, and we gotta come through. We gotta find a way to make this fit into the hole for this, using nothing but that. Let's get it organized.
Okay, let's build a filter.
Better get some coffee going.
All right, adaptive challenge, right? So I'd love for you to unmute, share with me, what are your thoughts about this clip as it relates to making conscious choices? Anything go through your mind when you're thinking about conscious choices?
Think outside the box.
Yes, literally.
I think examine everything you have available to help you make that decision.
Mhm. Even if it doesn't look like stuff that might be helpful, right? You might need it anyway. Yes. What else? Anything else?
No
Think
ideas.
about being in, I think about being in the present, just being in the present moment.
Yeah, sometimes you just have to sit with it, right? And kind of just let it sit there so you can figure out what you do next. Lynette, were you going to add something?
Yeah, no idea is a stupid idea at that point.
Right, right. And this was literally a life or death situation, right? Guess what? We're involved in life and death situations every day. And we might think about square holes and round pegs and square holes. And sometimes we have here's what you got. Here's what you got to work with. Here's the issue. Let's figure it out. All right, so next I have another question for you. And this I'm gonna actually ask you in just a minute to get busy with your fingers on your keyboard. But I would love for you, as you think about the choices you face right now, maybe something that you're working on, maybe a challenging case, maybe whatever, right? Whatever you're working on. What are you thinking about right now as you get that thing in your head regarding conscious choices you face in the adaptive work that you're currently engaged in? So think about something that you're currently working on and think about, wow, what conscious choices are there that I need to be aware of? And Alex is going to do magic. He's going to put a whiteboard up, and really all you have to do is put your cursor into the whiteboard area and start typing, and then just hit the return button and it'll populate onto this slide. Did I give the instructions right, Alex?
Annotate function on Zoom. You can just click that real quick and type in something on the screen. So, whoops, mine's going to the next screen.
Where do they find the annotate button? Just
so it's mine's showing on the top banner, but it might be on the bottom banner for you. Annotate, and it'll give you like the mouse, the text. So like my cursor's on here, and then I'm saying hello.
Okay, up above, if you might see view options.
Yeah, it might be under view options.
View options, and it says annotate.
Does that make sense now?
That should give you the keyboard options he was talking about.
Sounds good.
As you think about the choices you face, what would you be thinking about in regards to making conscious choices? Okay, starting to get some in. Go ahead. You can add more than one if you are thinking about more than one conscious choice. Alex, can you move a couple of those just so that,
Yeah.
there we go, perfect. All right, so we'll start talking, keep typing. That's totally fine. Limiting distraction to be able to focus completely. Absolutely, that is a conscious choice. And sometimes we do not make that conscious choice. And here's something that I would tell you is you can have your calendar, make that conscious choice for you. You can actually put some focusing time on your calendar. I have to do that from time to time. Time management, everything needs to be done at the same time. Not enough time in the day. So it's about prioritizing. Absolutely. And it's a conscious choice when you think about, I'm going to do this instead of this, or I'm going to do this first and I will do that later if I have enough time. It's a conscious choice. Recognizing individual strengths and what they bring to the table and using those to benefit the group. Huge conscious choice, right? Oh my gosh, what kind of like what they just did in that movie clip, right? They threw all those things on the table, but think about that metaphorically of all the skills and talents that if you're with a group of people, those get thrown out on the table and you go, how do we piece all these things together? Which is kind of fun work when you get the time. Thinking about the past, present, and future all at once. So a systemic approach can be a conscious choice. Having confidence, absolutely. And sometimes, right, we have to fake it before we make it. So you just pretend like you're confident. And once you get in there, you start getting your way and making it work. Communication styles of those I'm working with, conscious choice. How do I communicate what I need to communicate with somebody who has maybe a radically different communication style than I do? Good work. I wanted you to just begin to think about conscious choices. So one more thing as we jump into this more in depth, I want us to stretch ourselves, right? It's really easy for us to stay in our comfort zone. Lynette said, think outside your box. So the next slide you will see, it's kind of a silly drawing, but right, my comfort zone is this circle. And anything outside of that circle is probably going to stretch me a little bit. And what I'm going to challenge you today is what we call getting on your leadership edge. I don't want you to be in the middle of that comfort zone as you're learning today. I want you to get out on that edge, but not too far out on the edge that you're too much at risk, right? I want you to stretch yourself. When we think about getting outside our comfort zone, we want to expand our bandwidth. We want to think strategically about how we might do this work more. We want to think about how we can get others to stretch us a little bit as we continue our learning. So just on the edge of your learning today, that's where we want you. So here's where we're headed today in today's chat, making conscious choices. I'm going to talk a little bit, and you all are going to talk a little bit about how do I know what conscious choices look like. I'm going to talk about what is meant by default behaviors and why should I care about those and what they have to do with making conscious choices. How do I get better at making conscious choices? And how will I apply this learning to the adaptive work I face? So that's where we're headed today. We've already started, but here we go. So making conscious choices, what do they look like when I talk about conscious choices? The next thing you're going to see is a math problem and you're going to go, duh, Lori, what are you talking about? So the next slide tells us making conscious choices is about being conscious and making choices. And you think, well, yeah, so let's talk. It's a math problem, but it's not easy to get there. To be effective in this dimension, we must tease apart the fact that it requires us being conscious and making choices. That probably seems rather elementary, but here's what I would say. What does the math problem have to do with this dimension? Being conscious. That means we have to raise our intention meter, and we're not very good at that. Our awareness as humans, our awareness has to be finely tuned to choices that arise. So many times we go through the entire day without ever really being conscious of the many decisions that we make. And if you start paying attention, you make a ton of decisions. Why did I go this way to work instead of another way, right? Why did I choose to go grocery shopping at that store instead of the one I normally do? Why did I choose to say that in this particular situation? We make all kinds of conscious decisions. We make all kinds of decisions. We're not necessarily conscious about them. So we perform perfectly when we're positioned in our wheelhouse or in our comfort zone and remain somewhat oblivious to the fact that we make tons of conscious decisions every day. So we have to be conscious and then make those decisions. And raise your hand. And I'm sitting here looking at Michelle, who's here's traffic safety a lot in her world. But how many of us have caught ourselves driving somewhere and we go, wait a minute, did I already pass? Did I already pass that intersection? Wait a minute, did I miss my exit? Please raise your hand and tell me you've done that, right? I think every human has done that. It's because we're not conscious, right? Because our mind wanders, we have distractions. I heard one of the things that we typed on the whiteboard was consciously making time to think about something versus the distractions that can take us away. So the first thing about making conscious decisions is we have to be conscious. So we have to dial our intention meter up and say, ooh, I just made a decision and I didn't even realize that. So it sounds silly, but we're lulled into it all the time. 2 reasons this happens. The 2 reasons that we are not so conscious is our unconscious behavior works for us. It just does. It's called default behaviors. They work for us. We jump in with a behavior that is comfortable for us in a particular situation. We have had some success with it in the past. It builds our confidence and it solidifies our identity of someone who can get it done or fix the problem. We kind of become a bit of an expert. This behavior, while comfortable, generally skips this competency altogether. And we forget that we need to be conscious. It feeds into diagnosed situation, which is one of the areas of competency. The second reason why it happens that we're kind of in this unconscious and not conscious choosing is it takes time. Everything seems to move faster and faster in our society. I mean, we have everything at the click of our thumbs now. And to truly make choices, we need to slow down and consider perspectives of the choice facing us and understand the factions at play in any given situation. To make more conscious choices, we need to hold to purpose. What is our purpose here? Consider the competing values that might be kind of tugging at all of this, and then entertain multiple interpretations of what happens. So the reason why we're unconscious in our decision making is because it works for us and it takes too much time to change it. Okay, so now it's your turn. Your turn to respond to what we talked about so far. How can I become more intentional in a situation I face to train myself into making conscious choices? So if as humans, we're lulled into kind of this unconscious behavior, unmute or put in the chat, what is it that I can do to become more conscious of the decisions and the choices that face me on a regular basis, that I might just be in my kind of zone and just doing? What do you need to do? Somebody unmute and talk to me or put in the chat. What do we need to do? So Lynette says, consciously decide to decide. So you're actually saying, I know that there are some decisions I need to make and I need to decide that I'm going to be aware of those decisions. So it's about kind of that self-talk and getting your head in the game. What else? What else can we do?
I just think about like therapeutic stuff, like grounding exercises to get us more in the zone to know what's happening in the present moment.
Yes. So sometimes you have to just like take a moment, right? And Brooke, I don't know if this works with you, but I do a lot of breathing, right? I do a lot of, when things get crazy, I shut my door and I take about 3 minutes, and it's amazing what 3 minutes of deep breathing does for giving you just different brain power. So you're right, just kind of pull in a second, grounding yourself and going, okay, I need to be more conscious. Reminding myself to focus. Yes, Beth, absolutely. Sometimes it's just, hey, get your head in the game. Come on. Scheduling that time on the calendar, and don't be afraid to do that. Focus time, right? Focus time is important. And I think we sometimes think that focus time is not working. What I would suggest to you is if we don't focus occasionally, we're probably not doing our best work. So finding that time to be conscious about that. Awesome. Thank you. All right. So default behaviors, I mentioned those. What are they and why should I care? I think we know default behaviors. We know that they exist. We know that we probably even engage in them, but to taking a moment to think about them, sometimes we don't. So the next slide is all about what I talked about just a bit ago. So you're there right in the middle. That's your bandwidth, your values, your experience, your skills, right? Family, bringing up, preferences, triggers, strengths, all that. That's you right there in that circle. And when everything happens, like all the situations are aligned. So you have all the people of the world, right, on the top axis, all the situations in the world on the bottom axis. And when all those come together in that little bandwidth, man, you are golden. Like everybody goes, woo, look at that. Look at that performance. They are hitting on all cylinders. And you've even felt that, right? Your confidence, and you're like, I've got this. I've got this. But what happens when we have to grow? So the arrows are experiment, right? We need to experiment a little bit. So default behaviors are our habits of interpreting and responding to events around us. It's the way we behave that is comfortable to us. It's worked for us in the past. It generates desired results most of the time. Because of the desired results and it works, they get repeated, right? They involve our loyalties. So we may have a sense of obligation toward colleagues or an alliance with a certain principle or process. We may have feelings that come into conflict when addressing adaptive challenges, all those things. That's kind of wrapped up in there. It also involves our personal tuning, how we respond to challenges and opportunities, our preferences, our triggers. Those are all part of our default. Our bandwidth, our comfort, what's in our repertoire of techniques that we can deploy and our tools that we can pull out of our toolbox and get to work and get it done. It involves our strengths, our triggers, our vulnerabilities. All of those things set our default behaviors. So these four, our loyalties, our tuning, our bandwidth, our wiring, they impose self-limits on us. Unless we seek consciously to choose to expand beyond what is comfortable for us, we remain confined only to those situations that hit our bandwidth and our sweet spot. All right. So now I'm going to ask you, we probably know what our default behaviors are. We may not have taken a moment to think about them, but we're going to do another whiteboard. So click on that. Alex will pop it up and view options and get on annotate and get in that whiteboard. And I want you to type again, what are your personal default behaviors that you know about yourself? What's in your comfort zone? When stress hits, what do you do that works for you? What are your default behaviors? So Alex, we good to go? Almost?
Yep, all good. Mhm.
All right, go up to view options and annotate and get busy and tell us what your default behaviors are.
Hey, Leanna, there's a text option on there too. You did great drawing that. So the third one over, so it says mouse, select, and then text. Try that one.
Beth, feel free to add yours in the chat if you can't get the whiteboard to work, just to add default behaviors in the chat. That'll work too. All right, let's start talking about some of these. Keep adding them in. That's all great. So we have things like let others speak first. Yeah, I will just sit back and let this happen. Low motivation, watch TV, take a nap, paint or sew. Yes, absolutely. Maybe get irritable, deflect the situation, change the topic, get passive, rush myself, think I have to do something that maybe I'm not ready to do. reach out to supportive people or try to gain allies. I think those are probably some similar kinds of actions, default behaviors. Procrastinate, call a halt if it's like, what if we're like in the middle of a conflict in the meeting? How about we just say, sounds like we need to come back and talk about this again another time, right? All those things are default behaviors. And generally humans have three, fight, flight, and what's the other one? Fight, flight. We either fight it, we flight it, or what? We ignore it. That's our third one, freeze. Freeze or ignore, silence, changing the topic, tabling discussions, all those things. So we know what our default behaviors are. And our default behaviors, what happens is if we're in a situation, let's say we're in a really big conversation that is all about changing something that's really important to change, and it's starting to stretch our bandwidth and we're feeling uncomfortable. These are all the things that we do to pull us right back into our bandwidth. Because naturally as humans, we don't always want to grow and change. We like feeling confident. We like feeling competent. And when we have to change and grow, all those things come into a bit of question, right? In ourselves or in others. So thanks for playing along with your default behaviors. So we're going to learn more about our default behaviors. And so we've talked a little bit about what they are, but our default behaviors, they're deeply ingrained in us. So they're reinforced. We know that we can do these things and we're going to get the same result for the most part. We also know that default behaviors are influenced by systems in which we function. I don't know if you figured this out, but for me, there are certain default behaviors at play at DECA that I respond to and maybe even are influenced by the DECA system. Guess what? I'm also in other things. Like maybe when I'm in my kids' school, that culture and that system influences different default behaviors for me. Or when I'm in my family unit, both immediate or extended, right? There are some systems that are at play that may either change or accentuate my default behaviors. So each system is specifically designed to get the outcomes it was designed to accomplish. These systems often get called cultures, right? Cultures by nature seek to promote conforming to system norms. So our default behaviors are significantly influenced by the systems in which we operate. And if you're extremely self-observant, you might notice that your default behaviors are different depending on the system in which you're operating. These default behaviors also have met with success. They've worked for us. That's why we keep doing them. They have worked and got us where we wanted to be or got us what we needed to have. That definition of success encourages us to repeat these behaviors. Our tendency is to fall back on those behaviors because they develop confidence in us. Default behaviors also play to our strengths. Our default behaviors are generally what encompass our strengths or our skills or our experience, and we use those the best in these situations. And then default behaviors are predictable. That's why we use them. I know what I'm going to get when I do this practice for the most part. And we know that when we act or behave in a certain way, most of the time we can count on the results we get. If you don't believe that, any of you who have had small children, right? They have default behaviors. And I will tell you that from the time my child came out of the womb, here's where she had her dad. And she is 17 years old. And they called me a little bit ago and they are doing something on summer break already that I'm like, why are you doing that? And my husband said, because she looked at me and smiled. Default behavior. She gets whatever she wants, right? She knows all she has to do is smile pretty at her dad and say, this is what I want to do. And off they go. And I'm like, default behavior at play. Predictable, get what you need. And for the most part, they consistently breed the default behaviors for us to continue with. So what's the big deal? We know we have them. Here's why they work for us. So what's the big deal about default behaviors? So the old adage, if all I have is a hammer, then everything around me looks like a nail, right? If that's all I've got in my toolbox, I'm around looking for a nail, and don't throw something else into my mix because I am hammering away and it works for me. So what's the big deal about this? Default behaviors make it difficult to reshape us. Culture change, changing the way we do things, stretching ourselves. It prevents learning. We stay in our sweet spot, and default behaviors hinder learning and perspective and hearing different ways of doing things and trying different things, and we get stalled or stuck. They create blind spots. So our default behaviors, if I freeze or I flight or I fight, all of a sudden I am stuck. I have blind spots that I don't see or understand. If my default behavior is to stop a meeting every time it gets uncomfortable and I have to stretch a little bit, people know that. And now I've created a blind spot in that we now have to schedule another meeting, or I get kind of, people know that I don't want to hear what I don't want to hear. And it creates my inability or my ability to learn. And expanding our bandwidth becomes key to moving past our default behaviors. It keeps us from getting on our edge. It keeps us from learning. It keeps us from moving forward. That's what's the big deal. When we have these, they actually hinder us when we allow them to be kind of our way of doing business. So how do I get better at recognizing and making conscious choices? So there's some tips that we can try, and I'm going to throw some tips out, but you all have tips too. So I'm looking forward to some of your tips. But instead of making conscious choices about what type of intervention is needed to fit the situation, we need some tips. So tips for fine-tuning our mechanisms for making conscious choices. I will tell you, one of the most effective tools I found is in the toolbox of our leadership development work, and it's called getting on the balcony. Getting on the balcony requires that I see myself operating in real time in the situation. It puts me away from the action for a bit so I can see my default behaviors at work. Observation, interpretation, intention, all of those strategies need to be deployed so that we can understand our natural tendency in any system to respond to challenges. So when I talk about getting on the balcony, here's the thing I want you to think about. You're in this huge ballroom, right? And there's a party going on. There's music playing, there's dancing, there's food. There's this big ballroom, and then there's this kind of balcony that goes all the way around the ballroom. And you've walked up the stairs, you're walking up the stairs, and now you're on the balcony and you're looking down. So think about that scenario. What things might you see about a party, and you can unmute to tell me this, what things might you see about a party going on in a ballroom from the balcony that you couldn't see on the floor? What kinds of things might you see?
Groups of people.
Yeah, right. When you're down there, you know there's clusters, but you really can't see the distinguishing groups of people. Thanks, Leanne. What else? New perspective. Yeah, you definitely see from a different level what's going on. What else might you see? Depending where you're standing, when you're on the floor, oh, you might see tasty cake. That's true. You might not be able to see the snack table from down on the dance floor. Body language, facial expressions, yes. How people divide into groups, yes. You might hear people that are on the quote dance floor saying everybody's dancing. When you're up on the balcony, you may not see that everybody's dancing. You may see on the balcony that those who are dancing have moved away from the band because maybe the band is really loud and you don't feel that on the, so that you get a different perspective. So I'm giving you kind of a visual of what it feels like to get on the balcony. We have a quick video that Alex is going to show. It's from the Kansas Leadership Center, where we've gotten a lot of training on our leadership work. So it is going to give us a little bit more information about getting on the balcony.
This idea of being on the dance floor and on the balcony is a great way of thinking about adaptive work. When we're in the middle of the dance floor and we're bumping elbows and butts and elbows and backs bumping into everybody, we're in the middle of everything and we don't have a good perspective of what's really going on.
We spend a lot of time on the dance floor where we're in the midst of the action, where we're moving from one thing to another. And I think that maybe we're not getting the results that we want. To help that is to go up on a balcony and look at what's happening in this organization. Look at the systems and patterns about what different groups are doing, or including yourself, and how are you behaving?
We spend most of our time on the dance floor. We're afraid of the balcony. We want to get it done. And it's perfectly human, it's perfectly great. And you can't make progress on an adaptive challenge, on the really important things, the things that we care about in our organizations, if we don't take a little bit of time to notice what's going on.
Going to the balcony and looking down on what's going on helps people to change their course of action and try something different.
I love sitting in a meeting thinking about getting on the balcony. And what's going on in my head there is that means beam myself up and pretend I'm, floating above the meeting on that little balcony and just check out what's going on down there. How am I deploying myself? What am I, am I asking questions or am I acting like an authority or deferring to some authority? Am I treating this meeting as a chance to make progress on something we all care about, or am I trying to get it done? And so I go up on the balcony to check out what I'm doing, to check out the roles other people are playing.
We all know this to be true in lots of different ways. Think about football teams. They put some coaches in the press box and some coaches on the field. Think about those great athletes who seem to always be able to know where everybody is on the field, even while they're in the midst of the action. Well, we think leadership is really the same way. You've got to be able to separate yourself, to give yourself space to think about what's adaptive.
Okay, so you heard a little bit about this balcony and this dance floor. That's why I kind of gave you the metaphor, because I knew this video was going to talk about that. So when you think about something that you've been engaged with, an activity or a work effort that you're engaged in, and you know that you're in the work, getting it done, you're on the dance floor. If we know that making conscious choices has to do with, being conscious about what's going on around us, what tips might you try to stretch your bandwidth when it comes to making conscious choices? So how could you get on the balcony? I mean, we saw a couple of examples in the video, but what kinds of things might help you move to the balcony so you can think about the conscious choices and becoming more conscious of the choices? Thoughts about that? Think of what you might do to get a different perspective while you're right in the middle of something. I can give you a tip that I do sometimes, especially when I'm wondering about who's engaged in the conversation and who isn't. Sometimes I will take a piece of paper and I will just simply write everybody's name in the seating chart that they're in a room, and I'll keep track of where the conversation goes. Is the facilitator getting all the conversation at them, or is the group itself having a conversation, I'll just track the conversation, because then I might find somebody who's not been in the room, and invite them into the room. It looks like we got something in the chat. Learn new techniques and try to apply them. Yes. And sometimes that means being very conscious in real time about what I need to deploy. Value others' perspective. That could potentially guide you to do something outside of your own box. Absolutely. So thinking about what else is out there that might challenge me, what other perspective, actively seeking other perspectives. Acknowledge my conscious incompetence. Yes, acknowledge that I don't know. I don't know what I don't know. And I know this is true, and I won't make you raise your hand. I'll raise my hand. How many of you ever worked with somebody who just like pushes every button that you have, Okay, you don't have to raise your hands, but I see you've been there, done that, right? So sometimes those people that push every button I have are the ones I need to seek perspective from, because I need to figure out, why are they pushing my buttons? Is it because we just have a clash of personality, or are they really kind of stretching me in ways that I'm resisting? I don't know, but I might need to check that out. So sometimes I actually go seek out people with the exact opposite opinion of me, to, not that that means you push my buttons, but I actively seek different opinions sometimes about a particular issue so that I get a better picture of the dance floor. Get me up on the balcony with someone else. So this balcony perspective is important. All right, let's keep talking. Other tips for fine-tuning our mechanisms for making conscious choices. Sometimes we need to name the default behavior. Lori, you are checking out. And you know what? I've had somebody in a leadership session call me out on it. Say, Lori, I think you're checked out. I will tell you when they did that, I went, I don't like that very much. But then I had to say, and you're right. So we sometimes have to name the default, right? So that we know what it is that is our challenge. Then we have to test our assumptions. That's another way for us to have some tips. We can sometimes rush to judgment through assumptions that we make about others or the system that's at play or the challenge facing us or alliances or factions that might be operating in this particular issue. We need to step back, test those assumptions a little bit by asking some tough questions, like, help me understand why you believe, right? Or can you give me examples of, right? Asking those questions that help us delve deeper. Exploring multiple interpretations, asking for multiple interpretations. We need to press beyond the easy answers. We need to listen intently and be intentional about listening. We should engage with a variety of stakeholders. I told you that in regard to the challenge. Find people who disagree. We should start challenging ourselves to formulate at least 3 multiple perspectives or interpretations on any situation. So here's the situation. As I'm sitting in my office, here's the situation. Can I come up with 3 multiple interpretations about that issue that might be in conflict with each other? The idea is if I can come up with those assumptions, maybe I can stretch my bandwidth a little bit without anybody else doing it. Then consider those options, make a conscious choice, take some smart risks. Creating hypothesis statements is another way. If then, right? If I do this, then this, or that's what I think might happen if I do this. So creating those hypothesis statements and thoughts help protect what happens in any given situation. We can start projecting what might happen. Hypothesizing, we might be able to envision different ways of doing something, different ways of acting or responding or reacting, thus beginning to reshape those default behaviors that we have. And then another tip, getting extremely clear on our purpose. That grounds us in the face of our challenge. So knowing the big why, and I'm a big why person, you can tell me we're going to do this and I will ask why. And not because I'm trying to question, I just need to understand why. What's the big why? It helps us choose options. It helps us think more globally about the issue, but yet we're grounded in purpose so we know where we're headed. We know kind of where we're headed, but then we can envision some different options of getting there. So breaking out of our defaults, here's just some questions that I would tell you that have helped me and that have helped other people as we're trying to break out of our default behaviors. Just sometimes we're just sitting in a meeting or we're sitting in a process and we say, what's my purpose here? What are we trying to accomplish? What would I normally do? What could I try instead? What's another idea? You know, there's been 5 ideas presented. Is there another one that I can add? What would be the risks in this particular situation? Can we brainstorm those? Can we talk about those? Of all these ways that we've talked about, what might be our best way forward right now? What pushback can we expect to our ideas? How will we handle that pushback? How can we evaluate what progress we've made, right? Those are all questions that if we're trying to get on the balcony and get perspective and understand making conscious choices, these are all questions that in the context of the ballroom, right, being on the dance floor, these are questions I can ask myself in the middle of the dance floor that will help me put myself up on the balcony. And maybe by asking them out loud, it will bring the group to the balcony. All right, so we've done all of this. We know what our default behaviors are. We've talked about how we might break out of them. So now it's time for application, and we have about 10 minutes left, and we're going to talk about what have I learned? What am I going to do with it? What's my plan? So here's what I would like. I'm going to give you a few minutes. We're going to do it in quiet. I know it makes weird on Zoom, but we're going to do it anyway. So I want you to reflect a bit. And here are the 2 questions I want you to reflect on. How will you make conscious choices in the next 2 weeks? What are you going to do to stretch your bandwidth to make be more conscious of the decisions you make or choices you make? And then what will people notice different about my approach if I do that? So I'm going to give you 3-4 minutes to make some notes on that. And then I'd love to hear a couple of people share their answers to what will I do to be more conscious in the next 2 weeks? And what will people notice? Do you think people will notice different about my approach if I do those things? So let's take a few minutes and let you do some thinking. Okay. So how will you make conscious choices in the next 2 weeks? And what might people notice different about your approach? Anyone willing to start our conversation, talk a little bit about notes you took? So Brooke put in the chat, taking a step back before making a choice to thinking more about my choices will impact my families and asking why I am making the choice I am. Goal would be for people/clients would improve their lives, mental health, and improve due to myself making better conscious choices. So kind of just pulling back instead of jumping in, right? I think is what you're saying, Brooke. Correct me if I'm reading that wrong.
Yeah, I realized that I should have proofread what I typed.
That's okay. I just want to make sure I've got you right. Go ahead and tell me.
Yeah, I think that I think what I've noticed is that I think I would benefit from just taking a step back before making choices and realize my choice could impact not only myself but others potentially, and how my choice could potentially benefit or not benefit a client or family that I'm working with.
Absolutely. So the approach, people might see Brooke being a little bit more quiet, a little bit more reserved before jumping into a conversation or jumping into a decision if that's what you did. Thanks, Brooke. I appreciate that. Someone else.
I think for me, it kind of goes back to what you were talking about always kind of going back to that purpose, because I think sometimes my default behaviors line up with this idea of making conscious choices, but without making sure it's intentional and purposeful, you can lose, the momentum and sort of the true effect of it. Because I love thinking about the big picture and being on the balcony and looking at how things impact every part of the situation, but sometimes you can still miss things even if you're thinking that way, if you're not really being super intentional with it.
Yeah, so Cynthia, thanks. Intention is huge, right? And understanding when do you engage and when do you not. And while getting on the balcony is absolutely incredibly helpful, we can't stay there. We have to go, okay, I just saw something from the balcony. Now I've got to go in and re-engage in a different way, right? Redeploy myself. And being intentional about that is important. Beth, schedule breaks to get moving. Oh, my chat just went away. Sorry. Schedule breaks to get moving, go outside, walk around, clear my head, take time for reflection. And people will notice that I am more focused and that I'm considering more possibilities prior to making recommendations. Yes, Beth, I will tell you what I believe that has caused me more of a challenge from COVID is having virtual meetings that now, I have a 9 o'clock, a 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock, and 12 o'clock because I don't have to go anywhere. I don't have to drive to get to one. I don't have to do any of that. I used to have drive time, right? Because we'd have physical meetings and I would have that maybe half hour of drive time to get outside, get in my car, think about something different. I don't have any of that now. And I'm lucky if I have enough time to go down the hall to the bathroom between meetings before I got to get back on another call. And there is no time, right? So thank you, Beth. That's me. I need to schedule, 10 minutes of, I need to go outside and get some fresh air. Or I need to walk laps in the building or whatever. But that's incredibly important because people might actually think we're better at making recommendations and engaging if we did that. So thank you, Beth. That I will second that one for me. That's one for me that it just too scheduled and not enough time to be conscious. Someone else. Time for one more.
I really am just going to work on limiting my distractions when I am in like virtual meetings and whatever, and just so that I am focused on what's being discussed, so that I, may just be more present in the moment, limit my distractions, and make a conscious effort not to check that email that just popped up or respond to something while I'm in another meeting. I think that's hard to do, especially with Zoom. It's easy to click over there and see what somebody else needs or thinking about something else that's coming up. So I'm just really going to try to be present in the moment with what I'm doing, so that I'm just there knowing what's going on.
Yeah, that's the other thing I think that Zoom has done for us. We're sitting here, but we have our cell phone and we have our email up and we have papers all over our desks that need our attention. And you think, oh, I can just jump and get one thing off my to-do list and I'll feel so much better. But then something was just said in a meeting and you're like, ooh, I didn't hear that. Yeah, distractions. All right, well, we are nearing our time. I want to end with a quote. If you've heard Kenny Rogers at all, you've probably heard this quote. You got to know when to hold them, know when to fold them, know when to walk away, and know when to run, right? Conscious decisions. I know when to hold them. I know when I'm out of the game and I just need to fold them. I know when I need space and I need to go walk away and get conscious about what I'm doing. And sometimes there are times when you literally need to run away from a situation because it is not going anywhere good. So I end with this silly little quote from The Gambler, but it's really not a silly little quote. This is conscious decision making. Making conscious choices is, am I going to hold those cards? Am I going to fold those cards? Am I going to play these cards? Am I just going to walk away? Am I going to run away from something or run to something else? Conscious decision making is so incredibly important when we're talking about leadership, because we can get into our distractions, into our inability to be really conscious and present, and we make a decision and we don't even realize we've made a decision. I would also tell you that one of the things I tell people regularly is not deciding is deciding. By not making a conscious choice, you are making a conscious choice. And things may go around without you or go on beyond you, but not deciding is a decision as well. All right, hey, it is time. We have 2 minutes to spare, but I want to tell you thanks for joining today. You will, I think in a couple of days, I don't know, I don't do details. In a bit, you will get a little evaluation of how this went for you, what you would like to see different. That feedback is taken very seriously. I know as a presenter, when the presenters get together, we talk about how can we make these better? How can we help staff feel more connected to these competencies that are part of our leadership development model. So please feel free to be as open and helpful and straightforward as possible. That helps us. So with that, I'm going to say thanks for joining. Alex, is there anything else we need to do before we let these fine people go back to the rest of their day?
No, I just want to say thank you again for joining and participating today. We'll be having, more of these sessions throughout the coming months. We'll have 2 a month, the Tuesday morning and Thursday afternoon session, the second week and I believe the 4th week. So look forward to that if you want to sign up for those, if you haven't already. So I really appreciate your time. Thank you, Lori, for presenting today. Great job, and appreciate everyone's discussion.
Thanks for all your participation. Have a good rest of your day.
Thank you.